In Los Angeles this week, the number of homes for sale cratered. I mean, it fell with a velocity that I don't think we've ever seen before. Sales are rising, inventory is falling, but a closer look at price metrics suggests that this is going to be another wildly unusual year for the Los Angeles housing market. Is that good news or bad news for Los Angeles homebuyers? That's the question we're answering in today's Los Angeles real estate update for February 25th, 2025. I'm Jon Schwartz, California's 1% homebuyer agent, and I post these Los Angeles real estate updates every other Tuesday. So subscribe and check back to stay on top of the market. And if you're planning to buy a home in Los Angeles, you should really do so with a much lower agent fee and without an exclusive representation agreement. Learn more and schedule time to chat at jonsch.com. That's JONSCH.com. Now let's get into the data. And right now we're looking at the latest weekly print from Redfin for the Los Angeles metro market. Each line represents a year. The key is right there. Green is this year, 2025. Right now we're looking at the median sale price of a home in Los Angeles. And over the past 2 weeks, we were basically flat. Last week, pricing fell $4,000. This week, pricing bounced back $3,000. So the median sale price of a home in Los Angeles right now is $879,000. Now, if last week represents the pricing trough for the year, well, then we're right on schedule. Typically, home prices bottom out Super Bowl weekend. So not only was the Kansas City Chiefs scoreboard low, so were Los Angeles home prices. Maybe this one's better. Just as it was a great weekend for the Eagles, it was a great weekend to be closing a home in Los Angeles. Stupid too. Now we're looking at new listing median price. This is the price at which new listings are coming to market. Thank goodness we've fallen, especially in this past week, back down to a median list price of $1,036,000. A week ago, we were at the highest new listing median price of all time for the Los Angeles metro market at $1,058,000. You can see how extreme the growth of new list prices have been this January and February. We've really just catapulted beyond what we're used to seeing, and I can't think of anything to blame except the Palisades and Eaton fires. One can imagine that with this massive disruption to the housing market, some opportunistic agents and sellers decided to list homes at a premium because who knows, maybe there'd be a rush on housing. Fortunately, though, in the last week, it seems like agents' expectations have tempered, and that's reflected in the fact that the median price of new listings coming to market has dropped. Now we're looking at new listings. This is the number of new listings coming to market weekly. We've flattened out over the past 2 weeks. We're hovering around 1,434 new listings coming to market in Los Angeles per week. We're also hovering around 20 or so plus percent north of last year's numbers. This week we're at 21.9%. And that's good news. You know, we want a healthy margin over last year's new listings numbers. We want more properties coming to market in order to maintain a downward pressure on pricing, keep pricing moderate as we enter the spring and summer. Now we're looking at the number of homes sold. This is the weekly number of homes sold in Los Angeles. And as you can see, homes sold is beginning to heat up. This week we sold 792 homes on the Los Angeles market. That's up 10% from the same period last year, whereas 2 weeks ago, we had sold just 677 homes, which was down from last year's numbers just slightly by 0.2%. This is for sure a shifting dynamic to keep an eye on. And as you can see, home sales do climb, but they usually climb a little later in the year. This would represent a pretty early start to the spring buying season here in Los Angeles. And just as home sales is beginning to heat up, so is pending sales. Now, pending sales is a leading metric to homes sold because a home goes pending about 30 days before the contract closes, and that home becomes a home sold. This week, we had 1,179 homes go pending. That's 7.4% over last year's numbers, whereas 2 weeks ago, we were 7.6% under last year's numbers. So this is another big flip, another big shift in the metrics and something we definitely have to keep our eye on. This speaks to the demand that is coming into the Los Angeles housing market. And while new listings coming to market remains elevated over last year, which is great, the fact that homes sold and pending sales has reversed itself from trailing last year's numbers to leading last year's numbers suggests that we're actually entering a pretty competitive spring buying season. Now we're looking at active listings, and guys, we have a bit of a mystery. Active listings absolutely cratered this week. A week ago, we were at 14,212 active listings on the Los Angeles market, which represented a 23% growth over last year. Now we are at 12,656 active listings, which is just 8.3% growth over last year. I can't think of a time that we have ever seen such a sharp decline in the number of homes for sale on the market. A couple of possible explanations for this. One, lots of homes were pulled from the market by opportunistic sellers and agents who rushed homes to market in the wake of the Palisades-Neaton fires. Those homes didn't sell at their inflated prices, and they've been pulled back off the market. Another possibility is that this is a statistical correction on the part of Redfin, that they weren't tabulating their numbers correctly, and so in 1 week they had to do a sharp correction to where their numbers were. It's possible. At any rate, we now have active inventory hovering over last year by just 8.32%. That's not a huge margin, and that again points toward a competitive home buying season this spring and summer. As we would expect with active inventory sharply declining, we had a sharp decline in weeks of inventory, though it's worth noting that inventory numbers have been declining since peaking 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, we were looking at 21.3 weeks of supply on the Los Angeles market. Right now, we're looking at 16.6 weeks of supply on the Los Angeles market. That's only a third of a week more than this same time last year. And again, we can see by looking at historical numbers, typically supply falls as the spring season starts. And this year, we've just had that fall much earlier, again, pointing to an early start to an aggressive season. Here we have some good news for home buyers, but also just a indicator of how unpredictable this year is going to be. Right now, we're looking at the percent of active listings with price drops, and that number has skyrocketed since the beginning of the year. Right now, we're looking at 4.7% of listings on the LA market have price drops baked into them, and that's up from last week's 3.2%. That's 150 basis points of growth in just 1 week. That just doesn't happen. What explains this sudden, sharp uptick in listings with price drops? Well, again, if there is perhaps one reason, I think it would have to be homes listed way too high in the wake of the Eaton and Palisades fires, which have now had price cuts to bring those prices in line with regular market dynamics. Even though the fires were extremely disruptive and displaced something like 10,000 homeowners, Los Angeles is still a large enough market. I mean, it is a market, depending on whether you're talking about the city or the entire MSA, Metropolitan Statistical Area, we're talking about 10 million people. It's a massive market, and despite the fires, the market dynamics pretty much churned on as usual, except, of course, in neighborhoods immediately surrounding the neighborhoods affected by the fires, where you had a lot of families who were immediately looking for rentals. Some families were immediately looking to sell their parcels, or some families were looking to immediately buy a new home. Not many. These are the outlier families, I would say. But if the case is that homes were listed at inflated prices, it would make sense that a few weeks later, we would see quite a few price drops. This is another metric to really pay attention to as we move into the spring season proper, to get a sense of what's really happening out there. And one other very interesting data point, the average sale to list ratio is still pretty low. Right now, average sale to list ratio is 99.55%. That's trailing behind last year. Last year at this time, we had just tipped over the 100% mark. Same time this year, we're still at 99.55. This is actually an indication that the spring buying season is getting off to a lackluster start. As prices rise and things get more competitive, this ratio increases and pops over the ever-important 100% mark. If homes are selling above list price, the average sale to list ratio is going to be above 100%. and vice versa. So the fact that our average sale to list is still below the 100% mark, when taken into consideration with the fact that sales are rising, pending sales are rising, inventory is shrinking, well, it's a bit of a head scratcher. These are numbers we'll have to keep watching. And if you're planning to buy a home in Los Angeles this year, I suggest you watch my expose on the California homebuyer scam that's robbing California homebuyers of tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. Check it out, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.